Is there anything you would have done differently?
We reported a true story.
Our colleague Brian Williams is back in Kuwait City tonight after a close call in the skies over Iraq.
Controversial Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and questions about Kavanaugh's drinking in the past.
Sean Hannity, come on up, Sean Hannity.
Today, Andrew Cuomo is having a moment.
Hi, I'm Chris Steyerwald.
And I'm Eliana Johnson.
Welcome to Inkstained Wretches, where we break down what's going wrong and what's going right with the American news media. And Eliana Johnson, greetings from afar. Are you in Washington? Are you abroad? Where do we find you today?
I'm just on a brief jaunt, 24-hour jaunt outside of Washington, but I will be back this evening.
You're very jaunty. That's very jaunty of you. Yes, quite so. Quite so.
But we have some breaking news this morning.
Yeah. That's
won't be breaking by the time this actually...
That's what you do in the page one meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, it won't actually be breaking by the time we post this tomorrow, Friday. But as we record this on Thursday, we learned that the U.S. and Russia have struck a deal, a prisoner swap deal, that will free Americans, the Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich and the U.S. Marine Paul Whelan, as part of a big prisoner swap. And what we don't know is who exactly the U.S. is releasing in exchange for this. But Whelan, of course, was left behind when the U.S. made the deal to get the WNBA player Brittany Griner back. So I was pleased to see that he was included in this swap, and I think, in fact, the Biden administration would have been a huge scandal if he was not.
Yeah, the interesting part of this, and again, we don't know who all. I'm seeing some preliminary reports about who's on the list. It's a lot of people that the Russians are releasing to a smaller number of people that U.S. and NATO allies are releasing, but I don't know who all is in there. But the question, and this was raised by my dispatch colleague, Sarah Isger, and I think is worth noting, is this a lame duck move by Joe Biden? Is this perceived as something politically bad? There's been extraordinary pressure, rightfully so, from American journalists about Evan Gershkovich, and our consciences are pricked by the idea that we who enjoy comfort and ease and freedom see one of our own number being punished for doing his job. And so there has been this extraordinary pressure on the Biden administration to get Gershkovich out. And I don't want to overinterpret the timing, but the fact that it comes after Biden has dropped out of the race, I do find interesting.
Well, right now we don't know who the U.S. has released, so it's pretty hard to weigh in on the merits of the deal right now, I think.
And it may have just been it wasn't available before. They couldn't get the deal with the Russians before. And that, of course, raises the question of, does the condition of the U.S. election have an effect on how Putin and the Kremlin view when it's time to make deals and when it isn't time to make deals?
All right. On our front page, this week, we have former President Donald Trump's appearance at the National Association of Black Journalists.
Oh.
Should we play a clip?
Yeah. How did it go?
Should we play some highlights?
Colin? Yeah. How did it go?
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network. And I think it's disgraceful that I came here in good spirit. I love the black population of this country. I've done so much for the black population of this country.
Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
Well, I can say no. I think it's maybe a little bit different. So I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much. And she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black. until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always
But you know
identified
what?
as a black woman.
I
She went to a
respect
historically
either
black
one.
college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do
And
you
I
believe
think,
that
I think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you ask continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
So there was the ridiculous in advance of this of the Washington Post, Karen Attiah, saying she had stepped down from her position with the group because they were even allowing Trump to come speak to them, as if journalists shouldn't want to interview a former president and current presidential candidate. But was there any upside to Trump from doing this?
Well, there would be upside for another candidate, because one of the things that you have to do is show people, the important voters that a Republican talks to and going to black or other groups not traditionally aligned with the GOP isn't so much about getting their votes. It's about sending the signal to white voters that you're not racist, because there are a lot of people who would like to vote for Donald Trump or would be happy to vote for any Republican, but feel squeamish or icky about Donald Trump because of the allegations of racism, because of things that he said, because da-da-da-da-da.
Oh, well,
So-
I get why theoretically one would
Right.
go and do this, but given Trump's decision to go and to say what he did, I just don't see any upside of
No.
his going, which just produced 24 to 48 hours of a bad news cycle for him. Kamala Harris has dominated the headlines since her announcement, since she became the presumptive Democratic nominee. And when he gets back in the news leading, page one, it's for this.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem good. He, by the way, in his interview, he didn't say Kamala Harris is a left-wing San Francisco Democrat. He didn't talk about inflation. He didn't talk about the economy. He didn't talk about immigration. It just seems like such a missed opportunity to me.
We talked last week about the self-talk and false narrative that Republicans accepted after as Axios reported that it's a whole new Trump, and it's a disciplined Trump. And we talked about the piece in The Atlantic by Tim Alberta about this is a much more disciplined, different kind of campaign. This is a professionalized Trump campaign. And the problem with self-talk is other people may not believe it, but you might. And so if Donald Trump wanted to go to the Society of Black Journalists, he was going to go. But I would think that if a person had a clear-eyed view of how Donald Trump behaves, how he campaigns, what his strengths and weaknesses are, they would throw themselves in front of a motorcade to prevent him from doing this. But if you thought maybe it's a new Trump and maybe it's a new disciplined Trump, maybe you'd say, roll the dice on it, see how it goes.
Look, I think there's merit to the argument that this is a better campaign team. There's been no turnover. There's been fewer leaks, all of that. But it's
Not
the
yet.
same Trump.
Yeah. And as we've seen with the Project 2025 and the fracturing, the determination among anytime a campaign determines that it cannot lose, bad things start to happen. And we've started to, so I 100% agree with you. This is the best and has been. If you look at during the primaries, how well they did, how disciplined, all of that stuff. They also had, by the way, the advantage that Trump was on trial, and that helped keep Trump penned up. Trump in the dock was a better candidate than Trump.
Yeah, where he had
large.
5 to 7 minutes a day to speak to the American public.
Yeah, every campaign manager Donald Trump has ever had wished that they could get a gag order on the guy. But I think the feeling of inevitability led to errors like the J.D. Vance pick and also infighting against Wiles and La Savita over the throwing Project 2025 under the bus. And you start to see that stuff. And of course, for Republicans, unfortunately, it's happening. It happened right at the wrong moment because, as you said, Democrats pulled the rug out from under Republicans, changed the story of the race, changed the nature. That's when you want to be lean, tight, and focused, and Republicans were not lean, tight, and focused.
Okay.
So is Kamala Harris black? I will say, as Dave Chappelle has pointed out about Donald Trump, he is funny. He says things that you probably shouldn't say if you're the president or presidential candidate, but the line
He's
itself
like,
of like,
both are fine. Either
yeah,
one's
both
fine.
are fine. I didn't
I
even
like
know she
both.
was black.
Yeah.
I didn't even know. Meh. And that's a funny kind of line. And I had the thought with the my dear darling Jessica, we were talking about how in an alternate reality where Trump never ran for president, he would have the number one podcast, the number one whatever of the moment, because he is funny and he's outrageous and he's interesting and he's all of that stuff. But as a presidential candidate, it leaves something to be wanting.
Should we talk about Kamala coverage? Look, the flip side of this is that she's not being aggressively covered or questioned. He actually showed up at this event to take questions from reporters, sat down, took really hostile questions. She hasn't sat for an interview since she became the presumptive Democratic nominee.
Who do you think gets that interview? Where does she go? Does she wait until
let
running
go
mate?
of her teleprompter since she became the nominee, and
You're
she
good at
didn't
this.
show up to the National Association of Black Journalists. And the coverage of her, nonetheless, is so adulatory. It's unbelievable.
Who gets that first interview? Who do you think? Where do they go? Do they wait? I think they maybe wait and do a co-interview with a new running mate. But where do you see her going for the first interview?
I have no idea.
Is it 60 Minutes? Is it Lester Holt? Like, because it has to have enough gravamen, right? It's got to be serious enough, doesn't it? Or am I being old fashioned?
I think she could easily do, she could do a morning show, but also the fact that she's not doing it is just amazing. Like, I'm sort of less interested in speculating about her doing it than being amazed that she's not doing this. And nobody's talking about the fact that she's not doing it in the mainstream as they're writing about how amazing she is.
Her win bonus has been extraordinary, and the Society of Black Journalists interview with Trump, just as you thought the Kamala Harris wave of delight might be cresting, Trump comes in, does that, and it kicks off a whole nother round of pieces about Harris and the authenticity of her blackness and all of that jazz. So it has been amazing.
Well, so this is what there was a bunch of incredible Kamala coverage this week, starting with the New York Times piece. So the press has to find a way to grapple with the fact that she's rebuked, turned on a dime, disavowed every position she held in 2019 when she ran. So the Times runs a piece with the headline, "Why the Kamala Harris of 4 years ago could haunt her in 2024. And the reporter, Reed Epstein, writes, "One presidential cycle later, with Vice President Harris less than a week into another race for the White House, video clips of her old statements and interviews are being weaponized as Republicans aim to define her as a left-wing radical who is out of step with swing voters." Again, the story isn't she's flip-flopped on every position she held. It's Republicans are weaponizing the things she said. So that was amazing. And then separately, Politico ran a piece about her position on fracking, where she said unequivocally and on video at a CNN town hall that she would ban fracking. And Politico's headline, because her campaign is now saying that she will not ban fracking because she wants to win Pennsylvania. So they're now saying, and Politico's headline was, "Harris vows not to ban fracking in the face of, Trump attacks." And in the course of the piece, they do not quote her 2019 statement. It's just unbelievable.
The reset for Kamala Harris, any major party nominee resets after winning the nomination. You move to the middle, you become more accessible to those kinds of persuadable voters after you've locked up your base. And it's all of the honeymoon for Kamala Harris on issues, and we'll see we're going to hear her vice presidential pick by Tuesday. We've heard a little complaining about fracking. We've heard a little complaining about Israel. We've heard some grousing about Josh Shapiro as a potential running mate. We've heard some grousing about Mark Kelly and labor as a potential running mate. But the quiescence of the left and their avatars in the media about just letting her go on this stuff has been almost Trump-like, right? That the latitude that she is being given to make changes and say and do whatever has been remarkable.
Do you think it lasts?
Well, the reason that interview is so significant, Kamala Harris's 2020 presidential campaign launched beautifully. I mean, beautifully. She has Team Obama behind her. And it is true that she's kept the same campaign structure, but she's brought in new people and pushed out some old people. Anita Dunn's going to the super PAC, and we have Pluff, I believe, coming in. So you have sort of the cream of the crop of the Democratic political professional world coming in, but they were with her in 2020, and she failed. And she failed in 2020 for a variety of reasons. She's ran too far to the left. She did da-da-da-da-da. But at its core,
I think they're just trying to recruit David Plouffe. That's they hope.
Well, I know that he's had meetings
They're working on it.
But what ultimately caused Kamala Harris to fail in 2020 was that she couldn't do an interview and she couldn't handle it. The sit-down one-on-one interview is hard, and when you are trying to, like an Olympic gymnast, get on the pommel horse, swing yourself around, nudge positions this way or that way. You know, Trump's gift for those is he's like a wood chipper of words. He just goes and buries you under the weight of his of rambling stuff. Harris tried a version of that, but she lacked the ability of, as John Kerry would say, of nuance.
She can't do anything extemporaneous.
Yeah, and being flat-footed in those interviews really cost her, because people said, "Oh, this is the hype. This is the new Obama. This is happening. Great launch." And then she started doing interviews, and it was wrong. So how long does it last that she gets to do and say what she wants to do and make whatever moves? Some of that, there is an expiration date on it.
I don't think so. I was curious what you'd think, but I don't think so.
As Democrats become more confident that she will win, they will become more demanding, right? So a frightened Democratic Party glommed onto Kamala Harris and said, "We will take it." Her approval ratings among Democrats shot up 20 points, said, "Yes, absolutely, we will do it, we will do it, we will do it." But if Democrats come to conclude, as they inevitably will, that she can't lose, at that point, they'll have the same problem that the Republicans did around their convention, which is indiscipline, infighting, blah, 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 blah. But a huge pivot moment in all of it is when she sits down for that first interview, is she able to do what Obama did, which is to have good word salad? Word salad is not always bad. You throw out a bunch of Barack Obama, for example, was the greatest builder of straw men in rhetorical history, right? He was excellent at saying, well, people say that what I want to do is make everyone live in a cave without electricity. And that's just not true. That's just not true, he would say. And his ability to say nothing at great length was really profound. I don't think she will be as good as Obama. The question is she enough better from 2020 to get over the pommel horse?
I mean,
you say no.
She was so bad in 2020. And I think the other question is, will questions be put to her that even require her to demonstrate any level of skill?
She had a very easy outing in 2020 and failed. So the track record says that she will fail again. But people sometimes change and people sometimes improve. I don't know. It's really one of the questions that fascinates me most. How will she be? Who will get the interviews? And how tough will they go on her? And I think what you want to do if you're the Harris campaign is I'd feel like it's 60 Minutes. Barack Obama cultivated Steve Croft at 60 Minutes. So you get the patina of journalistic credibility, but you can cultivate this relationship. So I don't know who the reporter is, the interviewer is, who's like that, but they need their own Steve Croft.
Okay, up next. Trump campaign works to convince voters that Harris is crazy because of her laugh. That is from NBC News. And they write, with conservatives designating her laugh as, quote, crazy, nuts, and a cackle in recent weeks, the language used to describe it is loaded and steeped in sexism, experts are saying. Experts say this kind of focus on Harris is blatant misogyny, and labeling women in power as crazy is an age-old practice. It can be traced back to women being diagnosed with hysteria for laughing too much in the 19th century, which sociologists today say was an attack on female pleasure and enjoyment. More recently, Trump's 2016 campaign ads included setting Hillary Clinton's laugh to ominous background music. What should we do about our Kamala Harris cackle button on the beacon?
You've got to read the next paragraph, please.
And there's an added racial layer, according to Annika LeBennett, Associate Professor of Gender and Sexuality Studies at the University of California, who said the discomfort around Black and brown joy is disappointing but not surprising. She's facing these intersectional forms of racism and misogyny, LeBennett said. The mocking of her laughter is a coded way of saying, this woman has the audacity of being joyful in public. How dare she?
I must say that giving a person the title of expert and then the payoff is Associate Professor of Gender and Sexuality Studies at the University of Southern California is just a 10 out of 10. An expert, like an expert in handwriting analysis, an expert on pork belly futures. No, it's an expert in what? Well, she studies gender and sexuality at the University of Southern California. Mwah, just perfect. But don't worry. The Washington Post is here to help with an amazing piece. What's in Kamala Harris's laugh? Vice President Harris laughs at 128 beats per minute, the same tempo as some truly excellent dance songs such as We Found Love by Rihanna or Kylie Minogue's Padam Padam, which is why, after an unprecedented wave of viral content in support of Harris's candidacy took over social media last week, music producer Lars Zarucki sat in his Melbourne, Australia studio and recorded a remix. And the piece goes on. This is just an anecdotal lead for the Washington Post just taking a moment to enjoy Kamala Harris's laugh. They're not being bowed. They're not bowing to conventions around female laughter. Quite the opposite at the Washington Post. They're reveling in it. And another piece that I read, and I said, this probably wasn't even assigned to you. You probably just heard this on the internet and said, I want to write a whole piece about how delightful this politician's laugh is. Yuck.
Chris, did you take this next one as your favorite and we didn't remove it from up here?
Nope. I switched favorites. This is only me. This is only me noting the dangers of punditry and the dangers of unsourced. When we see material that is anonymously sourced, we should be skeptical. And this is a piece in the New York Post. Obama doesn't believe Kamala Harris can beat Trump, which is why he hasn't endorsed her, by John Levine and Isabel Vincent at the New York Post. This came out July 24th. 2 days later, Barack Obama endorsed Kamala Harris. And it's this insider-sourced, breathless kind of piece that says that Obama's not endorsing Kamala Harris. Now, it was obvious to any person from the outside that Obama not only was going to endorse Harris, but had helped push Biden out of the race in Harris's favor. It was all very obvious. And the reason that Obama didn't endorse her sooner was that he thought it would take time for her to build up support in the party, and he didn't want to seem like he was fixing it, and he didn't want to antagonize people, so he waited and had to do it in a hurry-up fashion on Friday because of pieces like this that said, well, is there a problem here? But this is just your reminder that during the silly season, during campaign season, when you see unsourced or anonymously sourced stories, about intrigues that are going on. You can read them. Just put a little salt on there to say, okay, maybe, but maybe not. Probably not.
Can I just say, he did take a long time to endorse her, and it seemed weird, and I do think there's something there. Just my spidey sense. Okay, and I also think he must be extremely pissed off that people are treating her like the next coming of Obama. So that would have been a better piece to write, like, speculation about why Obama hasn't endorsed yet, and like, hey, because I know for a fact that Obama was aggrieved when people were saying Biden was the best president since FDR in the first 2 years of his presidency.
Malarkey.
So he must be so annoyed at the media treatment of Kamala right now.
I when it comes to the endorsement part, and here I am using unnamed sources just after warning against them, but Democrats who I talked to believed that Obama did not want to seem like he was trying to railroad Democrats and come in and wanted to give her space to try to lock it down. It just happened so much faster than anybody expected. Biden drops out on Sunday. She basically has the delegates Tuesday night, right? It happened so fast and so thoroughly, much faster than I expected. And I would imagine much faster than Obama expected, that it then became obvious. It became problematic that he had not yet endorsed her, which is why they had to do it by tweet on Friday to try to catch up with the news. As for whether Obama resents the comparisons of Harris, a much less skilled politician than Barack Obama, whatever anybody thinks about Barack Obama, he was very good at being a politician. His meteoric rise was rooted in a lot of things that include the media and Hillary Clinton's deficiencies and all of that stuff. But Barack Obama was very good, and Kamala Harris is no Barack Obama.
Yeah, so he must be fuming.
He's probably chill about it.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the Democrats settling into the message that the GOP ticket is weird. John Podhoretz has a piece in Commentary, our friend J-Pod, on this. And he writes that, in one sense, this weird business is a brilliant ploy. J.D. Vance has been on the defensive, and rightly so, I'm afraid, for his blunderbuss words and his equally blunderbuss defenses of his own caricaturish criticisms of childless women and their supposedly dominating role in the Democratic Party. His remarks are ugly and seem cruel, particularly since he became famous for writing a book about how destructive a woman, his own mother, with children could be. I'm not sure I'd call it weird, but the whole business is off-putting and hard to defend. And since Vance was chosen by Trump in part to appeal to normie voters in the Rust Belt, defining him as a weirdo, if you can succeed at it, is a clever strategy.
John's piece was very good. And on the one hand, it's a little rich for Republicans to complain about mimetic warfare, right? Where that's what campaigns do, right? The goal of campaigns is to push ideas into the bloodstream. And Crooked Hillary was a successful example of such an effort. How many Republicans called Hillary Clinton crooked in 2016? They all did. They all learned to say it, and right-wing media echoed those attacks. And her crookedness became synonymous with Hillary Clinton. And it was effective. What Pod points out here is that Democrats are doing the same thing in return. They say, okay, what are we going to say about J.D. Vance, who is, some of his positions are weird, perhaps, but his story is not weird. In an alternate universe where another Republican picks J.D. Vance as his running mate, J.D. Vance's story is the great American success story, right? A person of straitened circumstances, rises through diligence, duty to not just have career success, not just have political success, but to have a lovely family and a good life, right? So J.D. Vance's story itself, J.D. Vance himself, does not have to be a weird story. It should be, or could be, a very nice American story and a typical, dare I say, Lincoln-esque kind of story. But the way to attack that, the Democrats and their allies in the press have landed on is, now he's weird. He's just weird.
And I think, look, there's a little bit of something to it. I don't actually think JD personally is weird, but there's a segment of the MAGA right that is into this sort of manliness stuff that is that I think strikes normal people as weird.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
I do think that JD and the VP's campaign could use just like a smart, normal, conservative woman.
Yeah.
I have a sense he's surrounded by a lot of men, boys, young men,
Dudes.
which
And-
is kind of like that's who populates that part of the right.
Yes, and the tragedy of JD Vance is what JD Vance made a decision in 2022. He was going to say, do you remember his principal adversary in the Republican primary for Senate in Ohio? Josh
No.
Mandel.
Oh,
Mandel.
right. Yeah, of course.
Just as nutty as a peach orchard boar, burning currency to say that the future was Bitcoin. Just as nutty as a fruitcake, out there saying the craziest things possible. And JD Vance made a decision, which was he would court Tucker Carlson, he would court those people and say insane things. He would say insane, mean, nasty, cruel things and hang it out there. And it won him that primary in Ohio and got him into the United States Senate, which made it possible for him to be the running mate. But to both parties, I will point out, if you ask too high a price of your politicians to get your support in a primary, it will bite you later, right? There is a cost in these things. And what Ohio Republicans demanded of their nominee was that they be an unhinged, absolutely fecal throwing lunatic. They got it. JD Vance became one and now is cleaning up the remnants of that now.
Okay.
Oh, can I just say my long-running complaints about fact-checking? There can be good fact-checking, but we have this obsession about fact-checking where we say that like all reporting should be fact-checking. This is just to rehearse my priors. All reporting should be fact-checking. That's what reporting is supposed to be. Is this true or is this not true? And actually, the New York Times reports that one of the reason that Trump was late to the stage with the Society of Black Journalists was a fight with the campaign or with Trump about whether there'd be real-time fact-checking of Donald Trump's performance. I tire of fact-checking as a discipline. The Associated Press proved me right with a story since taken down. Associated Press, this is a headline from The Verge. The Associated Press removes a fact check claiming JD Vance has not had sex with a couch. An internet prankster put up a fake quote from JD Vance's international best-selling book in which he said that he had Congress with a sofa, and they put it out there, pretty clearly a joke. And then everybody who repeated it knew it was a joke, and they were trolling JD Vance. That was the joke, was that here's this preposterous statement. And the Associated Press fact-checked it, thereby encouraging the story. And they took it down, and they have apologized for it, and they should have. But just episode 9 million of fact-checking is not a replacement for reporting. Reporting should be fact-checking.
Okay. Can we talk about the
Yes.
Israel Hamas headlines?
Amazing. I laughed out loud when you sent these.
The awards that have to go to the Wall Street Journal and Reuters. The Wall Street Journal changed its headline several times throughout the day. So one was strike in Iran kills Hamas's leading advocate for a Gaza ceasefire. Killing of Ismail Haniyeh marks the highest ranking death of a Hamas political official since the war in Gaza began. Then they changed it to strike in Iran kills Hamas's chief negotiator.
Amazing.
Keep trying, guys. And then Reuters went up with the headline, tough talking Haniyeh was seen as the more moderate face of Hamas.
The moderates were going to break through at any moment.
His highest calling in life was pursuit of this ceasefire with Israel. He wanted nothing more than peace after slaughtering hundreds of Israelis.
We were so close to peace, and then Israel killed the chief negotiator. Tragic.
So that was amazing.
How have you received the coverage? I'm not quite sure how to perceive it because I don't follow foreign policy as closely as you do. But the threat of wider conflict, the wider conflagration. And on the one hand, I remember when the attack, the Iranian response that led to the failed drone attack on Israel. So like that was real, like there was a kind of escalation there, but it has seemed breathless to me that we are somehow now much closer or on the brink of a wider conflict between Israel and Iran.
I think that is the Stokes' fears of a wider conflict is a specious talking point from the administration. The wider conflict is here, and it has been here since October 8th. Hezbollah joined this fight on October 8th. You know, hundreds of thousands of Israelis have evacuated Israel's north because of incoming missiles from Hezbollah. So that fight, a second front in the war, has been hot for months. And a DC area college student who attended a Jewish day school in DC was murdered by a Hezbollah missile who was serving in the IDF. So, you know, that struck close to home for folks in the DC area, or should have. And then Iran's proxies, the Houthis, have been active in the Red Sea. So the idea that like this is somehow going to get out of hand or become or spread to the wider region, it already has. And it seems to me, I talked about this on the commentary podcast with those guys yesterday, that the Biden administration's entire policy is stability. They want regional stability. Well, they don't have regional stability, and all they do trying to seek it is to restrain Israel, which in turn empowers Israel's foes, emboldens them. So it emboldens Hezbollah to do things like murder 12 Israeli children, as it did on Saturday. It emboldens Iran to empower its proxies. And they're getting precisely the opposite of what they're seeking. And I do think that these two assassination attempts in the same day, one of which took place in Tehran, and I think that's significant, are like one of the first signs that Israel is not going to heed the U.S.'s calls for restraint. And by the way, all the calls go to Israel.
Right.
So that's my 2 cents on that. Chris, you wanted to talk about Venezuela?
Oh, man, I got to say. So Venezuela, we can hold up as an example for Americans. And I know you've all heard it before, but we'll say it again, which is freedom goes away, free enterprise goes away, civil society goes away. Venezuela, once the wealthiest country in South America, is now the poorest or one of the poorest. And Nicolas Maduro, its strongman dictator, is the evidence of a rigged election, of a rigged reporting of the election, by the way, should be another argument in favor of the Electoral College. The Electoral College makes it much harder to steal elections because you got to do it in 51 places instead of one. And all of that, and all of it has been discussed. What's the Reagan line? We're only ever 2 generations away, and all true. But this piece in the New York Times, hours-long lines as voters surge to polls in Venezuela's pivotal election. I bring this up for the following paragraph. Mr. Maduro has maintained his grip by punishing dissidents, crushing protests, and co-opting state institutions. At the same time, the socialist model he once hailed has given way to, wait for it, brutal capitalism, economists say, with a small state-connected minority controlling much of the nation's wealth. Holy cannoli. Brutal capitalism? What experts say that what Nicolas Maduro has put together in Venezuela is capitalism, brutal or otherwise. Hardly. You can say it is oligarchy. You can say that it is neo-feudalism. You can say it is a lot of things, but it is not the market-based economy that Adam Smith described. And it made me so mad to read this in the very offhand way that it was put, because the suggestion, of course, is had Maduro delivered the socialist model that he had promised, that maybe things would be okay. But unfortunately, he lost heart. He wasn't pursuing the socialist utopia that he had promised, but instead has reverted to brutal capitalism. And it just hacked me off so much. And again, much as we heard about the expertise of certain associate professors at the University of Southern California, economists say, which ones? Who are the economists who would describe Nicolas Maduro's regime as capitalistic? Give me a break. Harumph.
All right, Chris, we ticked through the business news.
Yeah, I want to know what you think about this.
Okay. Norah O'Donnell has a new deal. Puck News reports O'Donnell has struck a new long-term sinecure-ish deal with CBS News to focus on major cross-platform interview specials while continuing to contribute to evening news, 60 Minutes, and other CBS programs. So she's leaving the CBS Evening News to do this. The way our product is distributed is changing, O'Donnell told me. How do we do those big interviews, that great storytelling, and share that in a different kind of way so it can reach a different kind of audience? In light of the secular economic challenges facing the industry, however, O'Donnell is unlikely to be replaced by another high-paid, high-profile anchor. Indeed, the evening broadcast will likely transition to an ensemble cast with rotating anchors, making CBS the first network to relinquish the half-century-plus format of a singular, expensive anchor in the chair, signaling another retreat from the paradigm. Yeah, I thought this is smart because the evening news, the Sunday shows, the morning shows, they just don't matter the way they used to. And so it doesn't make sense to invest in the highly paid talent to do those things.
So it was reported last year, a couple years ago, that O'Donnell had taken a haircut in her most recent contract. And I forget what she was making. She was making $8 or $10 million, and that she was going to basically work for half of that because the ratings aren't what they were and all of that stuff. But $4 or $5 million is a great deal of money. And I don't know how long she's been anchoring the CBS Evening News, but I really like this story. And I talked to a couple of people at CBS who might know, but I make no claim to know the whole story here. But if this really is her choice, good for you. Good for you. You have succeeded. You have done it. And you don't need to cling to it. You don't need to be thirsty. You can be rich. You can be happy. You can be successful. And you can let the anchor chair go. It's very hard for people in my business to do that. But an important word to remember in politics and journalism and everything else is enough. That this is enough. It's good enough. You're rich enough. You have done enough. And now, if you are a normal person and not weird, you might enjoy your life more. You might find that you like your life better if you do not have to grind it out. Because look, if you're making $5 million a year, don't complain about your work. But I would also imagine that for a mom and a wife, for a parent, the grind of doing the evening news 5 nights a week is a grind. And you got to travel with the big stories and do all that stuff. So if what it appears to be on its face is true, then I think that's admirable and cool and good.
I agree. Washington Post.
Yeah, here we go.
I haven't read this story. Can you hit this?
Follow-up file. The Washington Post, the story about Will Lewis and the effort from the Washington Post staff to unhorse him, and they already got rid of the guy that Lewis was bringing in as the new editor, and But the oust Lewis effort had sort of subsided after Jeff Bezos said, I'm sticking with my guy. And who should enter the chat but Prince Harry, whose lawsuit, and this is from David Folkenflik at NPR, who's been bird dogging this story to a fare thee well lead. Attorneys for Prince Harry and prominent UK politicians Monday accused Washington Post chief executive and publisher Will Lewis of concocting a story 13 years ago to shield evidence from police of possible crimes at Rupert Murdoch's British tabloids. In court, lawyers submitted a statement arguing that Lewis fabricated a fake security threat in January 2011 to justify the deletion of millions of emails dating from the start of 2008 to the end of 2010, an act that those suing the company suggests is part of a wider cover-up. So, follow-up file, they ain't done with Will Lewis yet.
Chris, that brings us to our style section.
Quite so.
Okay. The New York Times has a piece. What does it mean to dress your age? What to wear as you age is a highly personal decision, our critic writes, but certain garments still come with associations and assumptions. So this is a response to a reader question who says, I've always dressed fashionably. I still want to, but as I get older, I don't want to look silly in an outfit for a 20-year-old. For example, also this is from December 2023, but nonetheless, we'll still talk about it. For example, right now, I'm wondering about pants. Everything seems to be really, really wide and ballooning. I like them, but they aren't the most flattering. What about hemlines? Should they be long or short? Are there rules to dressing as you age? Chris, what say you?
Well, I have a lot of rules for men as it relates to the wearing of dungarees, the wearing of athletic shoes to non-athletic activities, lots of things for men. But I acknowledge this is a much more fraught space for women. So when I saw this, I thought of you and wanted to get your take, because we live in a society where women are told that if they're not 25 years old, they're not worth a plug nickel. And so women don't want to dress in a matronly manner. But I imagine this is a very fraught space.
I don't think it's that fraught. What I feel like, okay, and I'm 40, so I don't want people to look at me and be like, oh my gosh, like, why is she wearing 20-year-old clothes? Like, there's different things are appropriate for different seasons of life. And I don't necessarily think that's matronly. Like, you can be chic at any age. But when you're dressing your age, I think it's like when someone's dressing too young for their age, it's like porn. You know it when you see it.
Yes.
You're like, too much skin, too much.
Too trendy.
Too trendy, too colorful, too many patterns. So I actually don't spend too much. I don't think it's that fraught, because I also think it's like relatively easy to be chic no matter how old you are.
They have a picture of Sigourney Weaver to illustrate. And Sigourney Weaver, who I would imagine has to be in her 60s, I don't know, looks stunning, looks fabulous.
I'm looking up how old she is right now. She's 74.
Fabulous. 74 and fabulous. Not matronly.
But she's wearing an awesome long sequin skirt and a white
simple
blouse.
White.
Yeah. She looks awesome.
Yes. So it can be done.
Yeah. And somebody who is 90 could wear that outfit.
That's right. And
because it's not skin tight and not hanging out everywhere.
That's right. That's right. Know who you are. To thine own self be true.
All right. Up next, we have the British Olympic team has picked a food fight with France from the Wall Street Journal. And they write, since Britain's Olympic team arrived here, its delegation has run into issues with both the quality and quantity of the food in the Olympic village, a person familiar with the matter said. I already don't understand the British having issues with French food. As a result, more of its athletes are choosing to eat their meals at Britain's Performance Center, which was already stocked with its own chef to tend to the nation's culinary needs here. The idea that Britain of all places deigned to criticize French cuisine is tantamount to culinary sacrilege. To the palates of the French and most of the rest of the world, the short list of British contributions to gastronomy mainly involve boiled meat, boiled potatoes, and something called spotted dick. To the uninitiated, the latest dish is a steamed pudding made with suet. What's suet?
Suet.
And dried fruit. Ugh.
Yes.
I hate British food. They do have good Indian, but I'm not like giving them credit for that.
I do. I like a roast, Sunday roast. I do. I mean, they do roast beef. I give them roast beef, and the pub food can be good. But yes, it's not the delight that the Britons must have had in turning their nose up at French cuisine must have been enormous. And I must say, I'm not a big Olympics person, but I've enjoyed the coverage. It's been a very pleasant distraction. All of the Olympic, so a country that very much needed a break from political news got one in the form of the Olympics, and I'm as surprised as anyone that I am the one saying it, but I'm here for it.
All right, Chris, that brings us to our obsessions of the week, where we break down the stories we can't get out of our heads. So, Chris, I wanted to talk about briefly this Politico piece that I thought was the platonic form of Kamala Harris coverage that is essentially a campaign memo from Politico to the Harris campaign masquerading as journalism. And the headline is, Kamala Harris collapsed in 2020. Here's how to avoid a repeat. The vice president's shaky 2020 presidential run tarnished her image. She'll need to sharpen her message and clean up her org chart this time. And it has instructions to her for how to do so. 1, straighten out the org chart. 2, don't overthink it. 3, consistency of message. 4, those are the 3 things she needs to do. So there is no 4. And then in it refers to her. This is the lead. Kamala Harris launched her first presidential campaign 5 years ago to great expectations. She had a growing profile as a no-nonsense interrogator in the Senate, heavyweight support from Hollywood to Wall Street, and the raw talent of a once-in-a-generation leader.
Oh, dear.
Okay. So...
Oh, dear.
I don't expect... It was amazing. It's actually a memo to the Harris campaign of what she needs to, do differently.
Oh, dear. The raw talent of a once-in-a-generation.
Yes.
Barack Obama.
So how much do you think that pissed Obama off? Exactly.
Yikes.
All right, Chris, over to you.
Keeping on your radar, what are we going to do about AI-generated content? And Elon Musk was in a pileup this week or last week about a AI-generated voice of Kamala Harris that they put in what I will happily or readily admit is a parody of a campaign ad for Harris that Musk shared on Twitter. And this is, should this be illegal? Should this not be illegal? Grumble, grumble, grumble. And in the space of AI and politics and all of this stuff. So there is a new bill in the Senate. I'm going to do my research and I will report back to you, lovely people, about it. But basically, you have a bipartisan bill, Tom Tillis, Marsha Blackburn on the Republican side, Amy Klobuchar and Chris Coons on the other side, which is it creates a cause of action for people to sue. It's sort of Section 230. It would be Congress. It would be the federal government directing how litigation should flow on these matters, which is if you use someone's image, likeness, or voice without their approval, that this clears the cause of action and makes the tort, green lights the tort, opens up the federal judiciary for people to sue over this, which I think maybe is okay, but I have to do more research. I would just say we are going to make the rules, we are going to make the laws, we are going to set the standards for how we deal with the amazing power of artificial intelligence in the next 3 or 4 years, right? We're going to, in the same way that for everybody who doesn't like Section 230, it invented the internet as we know it and made a lot of things possible. And I tend to think that they got it right in letting platforms police their own sites and not hold them liable for what other people, to treat them as platforms that they could curate. I tend to think that the innovation that we received from that was probably worth the downsides. Similar decisions are going to be made. The Kids Online Safety Act is moving forward, but here we have something that gets much closer to the media world, which is what's a deep fake, who can sue, how can it work? So I will continue to watch it. I will continue to look at it, but I'm just keeping it on all of our radars because it will be consequential.
All right, Chris, that brings me to my favorite portion of the week, which is reader mail. And we have a note from Ken Kurokawa in Burke, Virginia. And he writes, "Hi, Chris and Eliana. I'm a longtime listener and love the news about the news. I also love the fact that the two of you don't always agree, which gives me a broader perspective. Am I the only one who thinks that Chris bears an uncanny resemblance to Admiral Motti?
I'll agree with that, sure.
Okay, in Star Wars A New Hope? Before you dismiss me as just another Star Wars nerd, let me inform you that Admiral Motti mocks Darth Vader to his face and belittles the Force in asserting the Death Star's superiority before getting force-choked by Vader. I think Chris shows the same courage in speaking truth to power and prioritizing facts and data over vibes and feelings. Thanks for all you both do. You totally look like this guy."
I will just tell you, Mr. Kurokawa, you are not the first person to say that I look like this person, this actor. And I've certainly been compared to worse. My appearance has certainly been compared to worse things. So I will take it. I will definitely take it.
Okay, we also have a note from Eric Tovarich Crotty in Astoria, Oregon. And he writes, "Dear ink-stained wretches, I have mentioned before my fondness for your excellent podcast, and at the risk of sounding like a cliched Hallmark greeting card, my platonic love for both Eliana and Chris burns like the heat of 1,000 suns. However, I regret to say that, with no fear of exaggeration, your last show was redolent of sexist, troglodytic misogyny. If Vice President Kamala Harris were indeed the point person in charge of dealing with illegal immigration, and that this would merit some sort of aggrandizing title, she should, nay, must be referred to as Tsarina, not Tsar. As it is with other Slavic languages, well, I'm not sure about all of them. I'm not a commie. Russian has a female case to include that of an empress or Tsarina. Again, you insensitive monsters. As far as I can tell, my cursory look at media about this aforementioned issue never once used the proper aristocratic moniker for VP Harris, and this missive will serve as what I've never heard this word.
As a ukase?
Okay, it means an edict of the Russian government. Very good. This missive will serve as a ukase, if you will, registering my indignant apoplexy that I, for one, am incensed by this egregious lack of protocol."
Mr. Crotty, Tovarici. I love it. I love it. I love wordplay. I love the joke. I love your letter. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Chris, that brings us to your favorite time of the week, where I am forced to say something nice, but please lead me by example.
Willie Brown is amazing. The quote machine, Jonathan Martin of Politico, went to San Francisco to talk to Willie Brown, former mayor. Here's the headline. Willie Brown on Kamala Harris, quote, "She'll deport my ass." At 90, Harris's mentor and former boyfriend is basking in her rise to power, along with those of his many other proteges. And so Willie Brown, who very famously said when asked about a relationship with Kamala Harris when she was running for president the first time, said, "We had the perfect relationship. I loved me and she loved me." And Willie, the quote machine, is back talking about it. He said that she would deport him because he was inconvenient because of their past relationship and all of that stuff. As Republicans definitely have tried to lean in on the idea that Kamala Harris slept her way to the top and all of that stuff. And the piece is hilarious. Willie Brown is hilarious. And he is a kind of politician that just doesn't exist. He's a kind of old-fashioned big city politician that just doesn't exist anymore. And a great read.
It is hilarious. And my favorite piece was a wonderful New York Times profile explainer style section piece about why Katharine Graham's Washington mansion has been vacant for 22 years And it is about a wealthy couple that bought this historic home. And they, of course, it hadn't been renovated since 1960, and they hired an architect and designer to renovate this house. And doing so in Georgetown in DC, they had to go before some board of historic, whatever. And it ignited some huge dispute with the neighbors. And eventually they threw in the towel, but they kept the house and they moved to Virginia. And essentially, nobody's lived in this house for 22 years, but all the quotes from the neighbors about their kvetching about what these people want to do to this house is incredible. So it says the old Georgetown board did not yield to their plan. In a community where lots of people have to park on the street and walk a long way home, is there really need for a garage? Because part of their renovation plan says it included a garage. Alan Brangman, a board member who is now the panel's chair, asked in a September 2014 board meeting. The saga raised questions about the old Georgetown board's authority, procedures, and accountability, including from Donald Graham, who called the extended review process stupid. I think the world of Mark and Sally, and I hope they do with the house whatever they want. Those are the new owners. So it is a really good, amusing piece.
A very good read. A very good read.
That is all the time we have for the news about the news. If you have an item or a tidbit or a piece you want us to talk about, email us at wretches@nebulouspodcasts.com and sign up for our newsletter at nebulouspodcasts.com. This has been Ink-Stained Wretches from Nebulous Media, produced by Colin Chicola. Find us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Wretches.